Hey everybody, welcome back to Overcoming Average. It's been a while. I'm super excited to get back and set everything back up. And Ed, you were kind enough to come in. When we were talking on the way over, and it's Labor Day, it was Labor Day weekend, and I wanted to go back and talk about an album that my brother introduced me to by The Killers. It's called Pressure Machine. And I don't know if you've ever listened to the Killers, but they're kind of known for Mr. Brightside and a lot of poppy, fun, digital sounding stuff. But this record is super, it almost has like a country vibe to it. Totally different music. And the song Pressure Machine in particular is really good. It's one of those that hits you and makes me think about home and makes me think about my family and growing up and my mom and my dad and just sort of life in general, and we were chatting before about life and how things never really get easy at any stage, to your son who's new to the adult world. It's like, it kind of hits you in the face one day. Maybe it hasn't hit him yet, but it's everybody at some point that every stage just has a different struggle and a different thing. And so anyway, check out Pressure Machine if you haven't listened to it. I think it came out in August, so it's fresh off the presses, as it were. But speaking of life, Ed, I've known you for, it seems like, I guess, a couple of years now.
Yeah, it's been about 3 or 4 years. Yeah,
and it's crazy how time flies. You're told that as a kid that things go faster, and I can't believe my kids grew up so fast and that sort of thing. But when you're in it, I was just thinking about it as I was pouring our coffee, and I was like, wow, I've known Ed probably 3 or 4 years, and it's just crazy. So, and we finally sat down to do the podcast. So I just want to start and give you the chance to tell your story. So let's just start with my favorite question, which is where did you come from? Where did Ed McCutchen come from?
Ed McCutchen. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and one of seven kids. I have 2 older sisters, 3 younger sisters, and a younger brother. And my parents, Moxie and Dutch, did a great job. They were paycheck to paycheck people, but we never really hurt for anything, and we had a great life. And they raised us that all 7 of us get along fantastically well. So to me, I think that's a gold star.
That's a win. Yeah,
that is a huge win. That's a huge win. And so I had the first few years of my life, which I don't really remember that well. I lived at 52nd Street in Philadelphia, and then we moved out to the suburbs, and that's where I really grew up in that area and lived there until I moved out. And
so I've asked you this question before, but I want to ask it again for the podcast. Pat's or Geno's? I want to see if you have the same response as last time. What's your opinion? Pat's or Geno's?
Pat's or okay. I said the other deal. I would say Pat's. A cheesesteak.
Okay.
Yeah, cheesesteaks, man. Yeah.
You changed your answer. Last time you said neither.
Yeah. Well, I pretty much, the deal with cheesesteaks are, I really didn't get down into the city too much or whatever. There was a place in Yeadon, which is a suburb along there, and I don't remember the name of the place, but they were open late, and they had some of the best cheesesteaks. And, when I was out with my buddies, and if we were out late or whatever, we would always say, it's 1 a.m, we need a cheesesteak. And you would go over there, and they had the biggest pile of steak that they were just slipping around on their grill. And then if you're in Philadelphia, the big question that everybody usually gets is, cheese or cheese whiz.
Right.
And
without, whatever.
Cheese or cheese whiz. And there's a lot of places when I lived in Colorado and here in North Carolina where they have on the menu, Philly cheesesteak. None of them make a Philly cheesesteak like a Philly cheesesteak should be. Philly cheesesteak is a cheesesteak. It's fried onions. It's steak, fried onions, and cheese. And then if you want to put ketchup on it, you do. And everyone else has Philly cheesesteaks with, they throw everything on it.
Provolone.
They throw lettuce, and they throw peppers, and they throw. And when I worked at BB&T, there was a cafeteria there. And on Wednesdays, they had Philly cheesesteaks. And Ryan, the guy who ran it, I'd always have to go in and I said, "Oh, a Philly cheesesteak, Philly style," which means nothing but onions, cheese, and the steak.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so let's go back and talk about that. So you grew up in Philly, and then you just told me you were in Colorado. Let's get there. How did what happened after Philadelphia?
Well, it's Philadelphia. I was working. I've been in technology my whole life in different layers. And when I was in Philadelphia, I was doing technology for an insurance company. It was called Insurance Company of North America at the time, and they were building a data center out in Colorado for disaster contingency purposes. So they were looking for people to move. Well, most of the people who were in supervisory or management positions at the time were all rooted in the Philadelphia area and didn't want to move. So I was single at the time. I was in my mid-20s, and they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, do you know you want a supervisor job in Colorado?" And I figured, hey,
That's awesome.
I'm 25, so.
When you say technology, how did you get into technology, and what kind of technology?
Well, it's a progressive journey. I mean, I started at INA, and I started in which really isn't too much technology. It was in the printing area where, they had old 1403 IBM printers, and you would load in the multi-carbon forms, and you would set it up so it would print the jobs that were in the system. And then after you were done printing them, you took them over to a decollator, and it took out the carbons, and then you bursted them. And so, I mean, it was pretty much processing all of the documents for the insurance company. And that's what I was doing in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Now, when they asked me to go out to Colorado, and I went, I was supervising the printing all the way through to mailing stuff out. And after about a year being there, then I did move over to the managing the computer floor, the computer floor where they had the mainframes and they had the tape area and all those different items. And I did that for 15 years out in Colorado, working on various different levels. Then when they merged with, INA merged with Connecticut General, and they formed Cigna. And Cigna stands for nothing but Cigna. And
the current Cigna?
The current Cigna, which eventually got out of property and casualty and is now a medical insurance.
Yeah,
But at the time, they were a property and casualty company, merging Connecticut General's property and casualty and INA's. And then they got into the medical care business. And after I had left them in Colorado, they shed the property and casualty, and we're just now people know Cigna as a medical care provider. Yeah. So anyway, I was out there, and they were moving everything after they merged. Connecticut General was in Connecticut, and INA was based in Philadelphia, New Jersey. And they were moving everything up to all the technology, data center work, they were moving up to Connecticut. And they were looking for people from Colorado to move to Connecticut. Well, Sue and I really liked it in Colorado. We didn't want to leave. So anyway, long story short, we talked to a friend who we used to work with in Colorado who had moved to North Carolina to work for First Union. And he says, hey, we could use people like you out here. So on a whim, we put an application in, and 4 months later, we're in North Carolina.
I remember First Union as a kid. They always had the green suckers with the white print on them.
Yeah. But so anyway, I went down my journey there at First Union. I came over doing the same thing I was doing in Colorado. It was, managing the mainframe, the mainframe, the tape area, that environment there. And then after about 2.5 years, I shifted over to the application development and support.
So let me ask you some technical questions about that. So mainframe is sort of, at least from what I've understood, the predecessor to servers and data storage, with tape being where you can store a lot more data for cheaper, longer, or whatever. So how did that work as far as those data centers and that mainframe? How did they connect the data? Was it all backups, or was it actually live like a data center now where it's internet based? data connections.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you go back or whatever, they had very large mainframes. I mean, at the time, the size of them, you probably carry more power in your cell phone now than
Yeah, sure.
you had, which covered up a raised floor back in 1970. But they were on a raised floor, cooled environment, had to be temperature controlled, and you would have your mainframes that would do all of the processing. And they're still in. Everyone kept saying the mainframes are going to go away. They're not. They're still out
Yeah,
there. Because they're beasts for high transactional work. And then the tape area was where your primary data stores, where your information was stored.
Yeah.
And then the tape progressed into having, data sets, data stores. And so it went through different evolutions in along those lines. But on the raised floor and everything back in the other time, there were connections in the, I always laugh, in the insurance industry, the insurance agents would have to connect into the system, okay? And then they would be able to access your data and be able to do quotes. And, whenever the system was down, if you had to reset the system or whatever, it would take 30 minutes back then. And, the insurance agents would have a fit. Well, then I move out to North Carolina and I'm working in the financial industry. Well, all of a sudden I learned very quickly in my first week there, when the systems have a hiccup and they're down, it's impacting people's money. So you have people trying to do point of sale, you have people wanting to go in and look at their balance, and they're a lot more upset about that than someone that can't get a quote right away. So, there's always been access, and now you advance to everything is in the palm of your hand. You have, you can do everything yourself. I mean, you have online banking apps. You can deposit a check. You can do everything along those lines. And
well, I've always thought that was fascinating from a digital footprint perspective, because it's sort of, like I said, the predecessor to what we have now, where it used to be limited access and only certain people could get the access to the data. But before that, it was files and mail, and it wasn't readily accessible. But that is such an addiction to be able to get information immediately and as fast as possible. And now, I mean, gosh, if the internet goes down, you just hurt. You're like, I'm so detached from the world.
even if it processes slowly, it's like,
even if it's slow.
We just had at our house about a month ago or whatever, our internet connection to the house went out. And of course, you call, and then they do diagnostics, and then they come back and say, well, Mr. McCutchen, we're going to have to send a technician out, to look at things in your house. And this was a Saturday. He goes, the soonest we can get out there is Wednesday. I'm like, what? So, and of course, you don't realize how much you have connected along. Like, we had no TV. You have with your phone and your iPad and all, you can use data, and stuff or whatever. But you don't realize how many things really are connected.
Oh, we're very connected, but also disconnected. And I know this conversation's been had a million times, but it's like we're learning to reconnect with people. Like, one of the things I love about the podcast is like not doing it virtual, like having you sit across and talk to you, because I mean, I sound like an old guy here, but a lot of the younger generation, it's like they don't even know how to not have their phones and to connect. And there's some good about that and some bad. But I was driving in town in Davidson here a couple of weeks ago, and I saw two girls just walking, both of them looking at their cell phones on a walk. They were walking, staring at their cell phones. I thought, gosh, that's just sort of the picture of our generation here, is like somebody always looking down at their cell phone and not connecting with the person that's right there with them. So
well, they were probably connecting. They were probably texting to each other back and forth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, seriously, it's just funny, but you kind of, in the technology world, it's exciting and it's fun and it's innovative, and you do these things and you put this app out and you have this new technology. And then you look back and see the consequence and think, well, how do we deal with that?
There's a old quote or whatever that was out there, and I'm going to have to paraphrase because I don't remember it exactly, but it was Einstein, and someone had asked him, what did he think of all the technological advances and everything. And one of the things he said, paraphrasing, was that his concern was that it was going to turn us all into a bunch of disconnected, people who don't think.
Yeah.
And, well,
Yeah, I don't know.
there's pros and cons, and it's all how you use it, because it's immensely powerful if you use it appropriately.
Yeah.
And there's things that you can find, and so it's not bad as long as you remember.
Yeah.
Don't trust everything you read on the internet.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, going back to your story, you look at how technology's revolutionized, everything in the world. Banking, you were in the banking industry. Speaking of First Union, I remember the suckers. That's because you used to have to go into the bank and deposit checks and withdraw cash. And now banks, as most people know, discourage you from using a teller. They want you to use your cell phone. They want you to deposit the check with your phone and, do it that way.
Yeah, you don't need to go into open or close to move. And they'll ask you, for security reasons, they'll ask you a bunch of security questions that hopefully you remember what the answer was.
Right.
And which is all good. But it really is something you just don't need to. There's a whole generation out there that just knows you can just.
Yep.
Yeah.
So with your career, when you moved to banking, what were you still in technology there?
I was, and that's where, when I went to banking, that's when I shifted over to the application development and support area.
Okay.
I was very, very lucky to work for some pretty awesome people and with some pretty awesome people. And one of the keys to, I guess, my success along the way was a line that I had heard, I don't know who before, it was just know what you know what you don't know, and surround yourself with people who do know what you don't.
Yeah.
That's a long-winded statement, but I was very lucky to have a lot of people who knew what I did not know. And I enjoyed it for the most part. I always tell people 80-20. If you like what you do 80% of the time, there's always going to be some level that there's not a job out there that there's going to be something that doesn't
Absolutely.
have its opportunities. But if you can do 80-20, if you can get to, it's a journey. Yeah. But I was very lucky in that business. Most of the time I was in the 80-20 ratio, and I was given the opportunity to learn and grow. And it was an ever-changing, as we talked about earlier, an ever-changing environment. And I progressed. I was with First Union, that became Wachovia, that became Wells Fargo, and then I left that environment, went to BB&T. And so I had a pretty good journey in the technology financial industry.
That's awesome. So what are some big lessons you learned in that 20%, the tough times? What are some lessons you learned through that career of yours?
Okay, well, some of them are easy to learn, some of them are hard to learn. One of the ones I learned is that sometimes you're wrong. Yeah, and you would get in, and of course everybody wants things to progress and do their way. Everybody wants their ideas and their concepts and directions to be the ones picked. And it took me a while to learn in a corporate environment. Sometimes people will listen. Sometimes you have to watch your phraseology or your presentation to try to get your message across. But a lot of times it is, they're big machines.
Yeah.
They're big machines, and you don't know all the internal. You think you do, because there's hall talk and people will tell you, this person's doing this person's doing that. And sometimes there are, what do I say, people who are not team players.
Sure.
But for the most part, they're really not. For the most part, you don't know what they're trying to navigate. They're big machines.
Yeah.
And out of that 20%, what I learned in a lot of the items is try to, it kind of sounds like the kumbaya statement that people say all the time, choose the, impact the things that you can, and let the other things go. And so one of the harder lessons for me was when you were in a position and you realized you wasn't going to go anywhere, to find a way to get pieces of it. or just go ahead and let it go and embrace something that
Yeah.
you don't want to move along. But another big lesson I learned too was collaborate, and that's not in a whole big excessive mode. But I talked earlier about surrounding yourself with really good people.
Yeah.
And if you get some really good people and you sit there and you throw things out and you listen, you'll probably get some really good ideas. And I love to talk. And my family and friends will always say, like, all right, we heard it. No, let somebody else talk. But in the business world and in those deals, I had to consciously go into a meeting within a group and throw something out and then put my 2 cents in and let the others within the group kind of bring up the things and collaborate. That was very hard for me to do.
Yeah.
But when you build a relationship, the last team I worked with at BB&T, I had a really good relationship with, and they would tell me to shut up, and they'd say, "All right, Ed, let me speak," and we had a good deal. But I think on the 20%, I digress, is that trust people around you, but it's also very much important of who the people. I wouldn't say not to trust, but be cautious around.
Yeah. So, you said you were in manager roles.
Almost.
How do you pick good people? What's a good person?
A good person is, in technology, people will say you need the person who knows the most about the technology. Okay. That is true. But you also need someone who has the ability to work with others and good communication skills. Yeah. And I've worked with people who have been the best of the best, or probably, I hate that phrase, people who have been very, very good at what they do, knowing the platform better than the company who built it. Even to the point where the company's calling them to say, how do I fix this? But they were very, very challenging people to work with. So one would say, oh, well, we can't move this person because they know so much, but not if they're not getting along. There's other people who really, really know what they need to do. So you pick a good person by what's the intellectual capital they bring to the table. Okay. But they also have to have the skills. I don't want a bunch of people who are all, afraid to step on somebody's toes and, I don't want to hurt your feelings. But you also need to have individuals who just have a good balanced act. They're very, very hard to find.
And that word was in my head the whole time, is balance. But balance is, I've thought about balance. It might be the goal, like in corporate world and even in small business now, a lot of people take these personality tests. Like one of the famous ones is the DISC test or the Myers-Briggs, and you get your score. You're a DS or a CI or whatever you are. And there's kind of outliers, people that have weird combinations of personality traits and whatnot. So it's hard to find a super balanced person. And I would even say that you kind of need people that are slightly out of balance sometimes to shake things up, because in the technology world, especially, there's so few people that really, really, really know software and hardware and stuff in depth. They're very, very rare. Like it actually makes me nervous to live in the world, because I know how rare those smart people are that know the depths of this software. And if they leave a company, it could crumble because of what they know. But when you get somebody who's sort of out of balance like that, they do tend to lack in some other traits. Like in the IT world, it's just full of guys and girls that don't know how to get along or talk or communicate their feelings, or they're just sort of known to be, living in their mom's basement sort of idea of the tech nerd that's always playing with computers and video games. And but those people are extremely smart in certain areas, and they sort of lack that balance of being able to communicate it. So, but that's created other jobs, and I think in my industry, a lot of times it's called a systems engineer or sales engineer that says, I can sell the thing that this other person made because I know how to talk to this other person. So, balance is good. And I think in the individual and the group, because with the disc test, you have, I love thinking about this, and I usually have my team members do the disc test. So if you imagine a wall, the D personality is going to bust through that wall, get to the other side, hurt themselves, hurt other people. It doesn't matter. Just get on the other side of the wall. And I is more like, hey, let's get over the wall. This will be fun. Let's make a game out of it, and it'll be exciting, and we'll do it together. And S is going to be boosting other people over the wall. How can I help everybody get over the wall and not thinking about themselves? And then a C is, what's the trajectory we need to get, a lever that'll shoot us over the wall. And you have a balance of these personalities. Well, there's none of them are good or bad, because if you're a high S, you're caring about other people, but you could also get walked on. If you're a D, you're going to get things done and you're going to push through, but people are not going to like you. So it's finding balance. And, those traits, I think, in a team are very important, because if you have all the same type, if you have these types of people that are constantly calculating and never doing, nothing will ever get done. You have to get stuff done. You need that personality and balance to say, okay, we got to get this project out. I know it could be better, but we got to push it out today.
Yeah. And I do think, I was kind of thinking of analogies as you were going through that. And you do need multiple skill sets. You do need multiple personality types in order for things to move forward, especially in technology. And I think one of the things, as far as when I was in the operational group, and then I had one of the executives reach out to me and said, "Hey, I have a job opening over here in development. Would you come talk to me?" And I said to her, "Why would you want me to come over there? I never wrote a line of code in my life." And she said, "I don't need coders. I have a lot of them." She said, "I need a leader." And she said, I've watched you. Anyway, she took a chance on me, and one of the best people I ever worked for, and gave me a small group, and then a bigger group, and a bigger group. And then what I learned from that was where I got into the deal of, you need to surround yourself by people, know what you know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you had to build a relationship with those people one-on-one. But more importantly, you had to say, how do you overcome the relationship barriers within the group? And a lot of strong personalities in technology. Some of them strong, being very bursts out at you, and you kind of can be intimidating. Some of them strong in a quiet way. They'll go into their space, and they'll kind of do their technology, and they'll focus on the other item. Part of a good manager, and I think it's some value that I brought to the table, was how do you identify those, and then how do you bridge some of the gaps? And it's back to the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you can bridge the gaps. People will have an opinion of someone based on other people's opinions, or they'll be taking the things a person says verbatim, where they won't see beyond the technology. They won't see the person. Some people can be annoying.
Sure.
And so how do you get to the point of number one? How do you help the one person realize that some of their actions and some of their phraseology might be pushing them away, and how do you bridge to the other people? How do you give someone a chance? And the last company, when I worked at BB&T, there was a leader on my team that was very, very good at always having some kind of an event. I mean, Halloween, there was a chili cook-off. There was, every holiday we had something that would bring everybody together, and then you kind of made sure the people that you did bring everyone together. Yeah. And some of those things are very, very important. So it's
well, I was going back to the album I mentioned with Pressure Machine. My brothers and I were talking over Labor Day about the sound of that record, and how with time the Killers have kind of mellowed out a little bit. And same with another band, Tool. Tool released an album a few months ago, or well, it was probably a year or so ago now, and they were known for being just super heavy and real complicated. And this record, while it was still Tool and it still sounded like Tool, it was just more mellow. And it's like, well, these guys are, they're 50 years old now. They're not going to be screaming and whatever. So I would like to think that people learn from life and they see like, man, I need to be more personable. I need to be kinder. I feel that if you can overcome that, you will mellow out. You will strengthen. You'll find that balance. But with regards to the manager and the leader, I think it's real interesting what you said about that lady that you worked with, saying that it's one of the best people you worked for. I'm reading Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Again, I've read it like 3 or 4 times in my life. I was introduced to it in college. And in this particular chapter, I believe it's chapter 2, he's talking about the difference in the leaders and managers. And it's a great analogy. He says that a manager is the type of person that if the journey is to, cut a path through a jungle, the managers are working on the processes and sharpening the machetes and, building the people and the strongest people that are going to cut down the forest. And they're just working away, cutting the forest. But a leader is one at the top of the mountain that says, wrong jungle.
I like that.
You need both. And I see we see the word leader thrown around a lot, but you really kind of need, as far as balance, you need both. You need managers and you need leaders. Leaders, sometimes I've seen, especially like in the church world or sometimes in the business world, they can see these visions that nobody else has an idea of what they're even visualizing. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And they might be in the right jungle, or maybe they're in a jungle that's just, a little bit, nobody has business being there. I think about this documentary I just watched, which I would encourage everybody to watch as well. It's about WeWork. And this guy's just a visionary. He had this vision for people to work together. And you and I work for A Million Cups over there at the Hub. And it's this cool place, and everybody's just collaborating and thinking, or at least that's the idea. But this guy at WeWork had that vision. He was the visionary. He was the leader. And it ultimately, he wasn't managing it properly. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of led to his demise, is he didn't have somebody that said, you at some point, you got to point us in the direction of the forest, and then you got to let the managers cut the path.
Yeah.
So you have to have both. You have to have those personalities.
And I totally agree with that. And when I told you the one woman said, "Come over here and work for me," and I said, "Oh," and she says, "I need a leader." I don't. One of the things that I had to prove myself to the team that I took over. Mm-hmm. And here I have this team of technicians who knew their job very well, and I had the team leader reporting to me, and I knew the concept of what he was doing or whatever, but he had a system problem. I couldn't tell him what to do.
Yeah.
He had another problem, couldn't know what to do. So I had to show him that I was of value to him. Mm. And I did eventually, and over the first month or so or whatever, and there was some barriers with the other groups or whatever, and I just kind of said, hey, we're approaching this wrong. Let's try this. And some of the things worked. Some of the things failed. Okay. But I think when you went along those lines where the woman who hired me and me moved over, I give her a lot of credit, because sometimes you put the best technician and the best person who knows, they get buried in the, how do I fix this code? How do I fix this issue? Mm-hmm. And they go into their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Well, my comfort zone was trying to navigate with people and trying to bridge things. My uncomfort zone, if that's a word, definitely was the technology. And, would I let these groups down or whatever because I didn't know? But if you build a relationship and you get mutual trust back and forth, it will work. Okay. It will fail sometimes, but it will work. And corporations and technology, they're also living organisms, is where they'll be going along and they'll be fine, and then there's a technology shift or there's a executive leadership shift, and it's like, get kneecapped or do something along the line where it's, how to walk, but you have to learn how to do it all over again in this environment. And takes you from your 80-20 to your 60-40, and then you have to work your way back again.
Yeah. Well, and there's a breaking point too, where sometimes there's no perfect balance is kind of what I've recognized. Like there's no perfect balance. Even thinking about the banking industry, like you said, I mean, being in Charlotte, I watched the First Union to Wachovia to Wells, and even BB&T just got, they acquired SunTrust and all this stuff. So it makes you think like, what's going on there? Like, can one brand not stand the test of time, or is that really a good thing to be buying and selling companies? And, I think about the Blockbuster video scenario. And again, another documentary, I love documentaries, and they talk about the demise of Blockbuster Video. I mean, they were the absolute king of movies for as long as there were VHS and DVDs. And when Netflix came along, it wasn't that Blockbuster couldn't compete. They were close. They were on the heels of Netflix, but they just had over leveraged their money, and they just got in debt and they couldn't keep up. So it wasn't that they were a bad company or that they were behind the times on technology. The decisions that they had made as a business got them over leveraged, and they were in too much debt to be able to keep up.
Yeah. And you look in the other dealing with all the mergers, even I went through it with insurance, and I went through it many times in banking. And it goes back to a common theme that I have in there too is, when you blend companies together, you're blending cultures. And sometimes they do it and they go very well. Sometimes they'll do it where from the outside, from the investor's point of view, it says, oh, the cultures are the same. This is a great match. But then when you get in there and you get under the covers, you realize in certain groups or whatever, they're definitely not.
Sure.
Which then takes you from your 80-20 to your 50-50, and then you have to evolve back again or whatever. And which, gets me back to when you're looking at yourself and you're looking at what fills your passion or what fills your capacity and stuff or whatever. And that's not always, my percentages, I keep throwing it out here or whatever to get to 80-20. But as you're going through all of those items so that you don't do something reactionary because something's really, really item that you kind of say, okay, well, I want to be 80-20 right now. 40-60, 40% like it, 60% don't. And you have to look at the 40% and say, what do you or don't you? And not that you have to stay in the same scenario and leverage to make it work, but I think we've become I'm generalizing, which isn't right, but I think there are sections of our society which has come to the point of, we discard, we have technology. It's like, we used to have TVs and the people got fixed, you had to go and get I'm showing my age. You had to get tubes and you had to do other items. Now something breaks, you just replace it.
Yeah.
And so we're in a disposable, instant gratification disposal society. And so sometimes people will say, well, I really don't like this and whatever, and go like, well, okay, I'm going to go do something different. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
That's not a bad thing. I'm not saying people should really stick into a rut. But
Right.
I think thinking through where are you on your 80-20, 50-50, and what do you want to shift or what do you want to? I'm getting very philosophical here.
No, I mean, I love it. I love philosophy, and I love that. Again, to that Stephen Covey book, he talks about our centers of life, and people have different centers, meaning you might be business centric or money centric or family centric or centered around your church or your community or your friends or whatever. And all of them, if out of balance, can be a detriment. Mm-hmm. And he gives a great example of, what if somebody invites you, you have plans to go to a concert on Friday night, and then your boss calls and says, you have to work. Well, depending on your center, might come up with the response that you give to that, hey, the request to work. You might say, great, this is an opportunity to improve my career, or, oh, I get a bonus. Or you might think, I've been excited about going to this concert with my wife. I'm going to tell my boss no, and I'm going to go with my wife. Or if you're, I like the fact that he says church centered, not God centered, but church centered. Some church centered people might say, well, what kind of concert is it? Is it a Christian concert? Is it a rock concert? Who's going to be there from church? Any of those and all of those can lead to detriment. I mean, and some of them I think people might think of as a noble cause, like family, for instance. I would say family is a really great one, and job is as well. But it's a balance, because if you don't spend time with your family, they're going to hate you, and you're going to just live a life of work and money. But if you don't work and make money, you can't have a family. You can't provide for them. So it's a balance. So Stephen Covey encourages principle-centered life. So you say, these are the principles, and I'm going to base my decisions off of the principles of, whether it's like, I'm not going to buy anything unless I can afford it. That's a principle. I'm going to stay out of debt. Those sort of things. I'm going to spend time with my family, but also provide and balance. And balance might even be part of the principle. It's just finding a balance. But, balance is difficult because everybody interprets the world a little bit differently, and they see through their own eyes and what's important to them. But again, to that book, he calls that self-centeredness, where a lot of our opinions are just, I'm going to that concert. I don't care what anybody says, my wife or my boss. I want to go to the concert.
Yeah.
I think that would be probably the most common thing. But finding the balance in how technology has impacted our careers and our life, you have to move forward, and there are definite consequences for good or for bad. I mean, medical. We wouldn't have the medicine we have today without technology. We wouldn't have the freedom today without technology. I mean, there are still people on this earth that live like it's, 500 BC.
Yeah, I know individuals who still write checks. They still want to go to the bank to deposit their money. They don't trust transferring money in financial institutions, and there's never an environment with a zero risk. Being in a bank and technology, they're for the most part, if you're a reputable financial institution, you're probably safer doing it electronically than putting a check in the mail. But again, it's what the good thing about it is people do have options of what they want to do, and there was a book I read called Fear. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's an older book. It's I don't know that they've updated it, but it's probably at least 10 years old. But the concept of the book is that we're a fear society because what we get on the news and what we get on everything else is the small percentage of the issue, not the bigger issue. So all of our news cycles, all of our paper, all of our social media is what went wrong. Okay, so somebody gets mugged in the Publix parking lot. Everybody puts it on the deal, which then makes everybody afraid to go to supermarkets. Or something happened, Bernie Madoff, I'm butchering his last name, but the investment deal. So people will see these items, and not that there's not bad in the world and not that we don't need to be cautious, but it gets more coverage, more press. So then people live in fear, when if you look at the actual statistics of where things are, we're okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same. I think there's the same theme kind of where you're going in the deal. I think when you're looking at technology, do you use it? Don't you use it? Well, it's safer than not.
Right.
But you do need to be cautious. I'm not telling people not to have antivirusware on their computers, not to make sure there's that F's after the HTTP, and not to answer phishing emails that look real. So I mean, there's a lot of risks out there that people need to be educated and aware of.
Absolutely.
And
well, if you live your life in fear, you can't move forward. And we were talking on the way here about some of the other podcasts we've done in review of the Jordan Peterson books, and he kind of talks about the way a cat explores the world. Like if you put a baby cat or even, a cat that's new to a home, they don't just start running around. They kind of explore and they go into rooms that they're cautious about, but eventually the cat will cover the whole house and they're comfortable with it, but they just take it. You have to enter that dark room that you're not sure about. So you can't live in fear or you'll just be immobilized. Mm-hmm. And now, my neighbor's cat over here, this cat, everybody knows it. It's been a couple of years now, and that cat is around the whole neighborhood, catching mice and rabbits left and right. But that cat slowly gets comfortable with how far it will go out. And I've seen it further and further out, which at some point can be dangerous for the cat. But as long as it's it knows, hey, I've got to explore a little bit. I've got to be in a slightly dangerous zone to be able to expand my world.
Yeah.
So let's bring it back to you. So you now have a company. How did that come about?
That came about, of course, where we left off my business career, I was working at BB&T, and I was supporting a payments technology group. And when I got in my early 60s, I always said sometimes working in I just know I can only speak for technology, but I think other businesses are probably like that. You go into kind of a Bill Murray Groundhog's Day, you kind of go around and you do something and then something changes, either the technology or you shift around the leadership above you and everybody has a great new idea that's really not that new. It's just packaged differently.
Sure.
And so we kind of shifted around and, we kind of shuffled the deck and we came down to some great new ideas. And at the time I used to be, the impressive young guy on the group, now I'm the old guy going through all this stuff over and over again. And it was frustrating me. Okay. So I married well, give a plug to my wife, Sue. And we were talking about it or whatever and saying, hey, this was frustrating me. And we came to the agreement of going why don't we look at me retiring from the business world? And we did. And we could. So I did. And so here I was, 62 years old, and I got off the corporate train.
Yeah.
Okay. And my wife's still working, so I became the house dude. So I was doing the cooking and the cleaning and we call it hazeling. So I was that guy. And I was liking it. But then after it took me about 2 or 3 months to purge the corporate demons and was a much happier person. And then I realized, well, hell, I'm 62 years old. I can't just sit around and do this. I need to do something.
So let me pause you there for a second. I want to come back to Chewy Digital, but I want to ask you about your frame of mind when you made that decision, because, I'm 39. I own a business. I have no idea what retirement will look like for me, but talk me through what is that conversation like with your wife or those frustrations or that excitement of saying, okay, this part of my life is going to be behind me and I'm going to step out and do my own thing. What were the key factors that made you make that choice?
The primarily key factor was my state of mind and my frustration. Okay. And I had, and we'll digress. In 2005, I was up on a ladder putting Christmas stuff away, and the supporting legs decided to not support me anymore, and I decided to land on my head. So the bad news is I fractured my skull. The good news is I'm here. I'm a very, very lucky man, as I've been told by many doctors. But the only kind of fallout from that was I would get frustrated faster. Okay, so my tolerance for situations or different items would impact me. So when I was at work and it was going through these other items and going through these deals, I was in this phase of I call it the Popeye effect. I've had all I can stands and can't stands no more. And the younger generation probably won't get that, but some of the older people will. So I was in the Popeye effect and Sue and I would both see it. I would come home and I would just be grumpy.
Yeah.
And then that's when we started talking about it and said, well, what do we think the cause of this is? And part of the cause was, just me of who I am post headed venture. And part of it was what was part of the contributing factors, and we believed work was. So then we went into the next phase. Can we afford me not to work? Okay. And that's when we started looking at financially, were we in a position, and luckily we were. You know, my son was through college, my daughter was in college, we had that money put aside. And so financially, we were lucky enough to be in a position where we could make the adjustment. And so I did.
So did you make a plan to retire, or did you just kind of look one day? Because I personally am always thinking about, should I plan? Should I know the year and the date and the dollar amount? Or did it just kind of come about for you?
Well, we had, luckily for us, probably about 25 years ago, we got connected with a very, very good financial advisor. And he was very good as far as, what are we working towards?
Right.
And at the time, retirement was way, way off in the future.
Yeah.
But of course, we were working towards saving for our children's education. We were working towards, retirement. We wanted to make sure that we had fun along the way. And so we were looking at all these different items of what are our different buckets. Okay. And he helped us stage up. So we started, probably when I was 40.
Okay.
And we
Wow.
and we sat there and got a good advisor, and we sat down, and then would meet with them a couple times a year and just say, and then when we were going to make a big decision, we would just say, is this a kind of a cool thing to do?
Yeah.
And it's our money, we can make our own choice, but we would bounce off. So I think having a one-on-one relationship with a good financial advisor who can kind of take a look at that. So when we got to the point where we wanted to do it, of course, a funny story is, so we said, hey, let's get with James and kind of make sure this is okay before we pull a plug. So we go over to his office and we sit down, and it was like, you have all the drug commercials on TV, and then before it ends, they go in, may cause drowsiness, may cause da-da-da-da. So we go in and we sit down. He has a big monitor on his TV, and he says, so, I understand you're looking at, basically retiring or whatever. And he says, well, he goes, it is, Ed, it's part of my role to tell you that, retiring at 68 or 72 is probably will put you in a better financial position or whatever. And I looked at him, I said, was that your drug commercial byline? And he goes, well, kind of. He goes, but you can afford this. He goes, I just wanted to let you know that your situation. So we kind of laughed at that. And so we were blessed. Sue and I know that. We were in a position that some people may or may not be, but we also kind of planned along the way.
Well, and going back to what we said earlier, life, there's never a part, I guess, that's easy. But to bring it back to your current venture, it's nice to know that it's not like the book is closed. It's just a new chapter, and you've got new things, new exciting ways to make money, different goals or whatever. So tell us about that. Tell us how you started your company.
Well, it's how I started. It was like, after, purging the corporate demons, and I was sitting around and I said, I really need to do something, At the time I was biking a lot. And so I would go out and ride my bike every morning, and then I'd come home and figure out my day, which was all, domestication. And then I just said, I need to do something. I'm still a young guy. And back in the mid 80s when VCRs first came out, okay, I went out and bought a VCR. And after I had it home and had it for a while, and I'm just going to Blockbuster and I'm putting movies in and watching, and I realized it had an audio dub button on it, which I didn't buy it with that feature, but it did. So then I thought, oh. So I went and got my parents' old reel-to-reel home movies when I was up in Philadelphia. I brought them down. I spliced them together by groupings, all the Christmases in order, all the, different categories. And then at the time, I didn't know how to put them on videotape, so I took them to a place who put them on videotape. And then the next time I was up, I brought a bunch of my parents' music, their albums back, and then I audio dubbed the soundtrack of their life onto the videotapes, and then I made copies for my parents and all my siblings. that was the first venture I did of digit, and this was before you. This was when everything was VCRs and audio dubbing with through a turntable, and this was before Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere or all the digital software. So then I would got a video camera, and then I would start videoing. I'd go up to the Jersey Shore, Ocean City or Seattle, New Jersey, with my family, my sisters, and their gazillion kids. And I would video the week's vacation. Then I'd put a little shore trip video together.
Yeah.
And it was VCR to VCR, and it was mixing the music, and then I'd give it back to all them. So that's how I started playing around with it. And I eventually, software came out, and I did Pinnacle for a while. Then I went to Final Cut Pro. And I did most of it as a hobby because I really enjoyed the creative deals of it and blending it together. And a couple times along the way, I would do, we'd have some friends that said, hey, Johnny's graduating from high school. Can I give you a bunch of stuff? Will you put something together? And so I would do that. So after I retired, I was sitting there thinking, well, what can I do? And then I thought, well, I love doing this.
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty appropriate time where a lot of people have videotapes and camcorder tapes and old Super 8 or 8 millimeter reel-to-reel movies, and they don't have equipment to play them on anymore.
Right.
You can't find a projector unless you have one. If you have a projector, you probably can't find the bulb to replace or put in it. And then same thing with VCRs. People may have a VCR, they may not. They may or may not have their camcorders anymore. And everything that I'm doing, people can do themselves.
Sure.
You can go on, do a search, and you can find software. There's, conversion. You can plug it into your computer, plug it into your VCR, and you can convert it. The thing I figured that I might be able to offer is, number one, do people want to do that themselves? Do they have the time to do it themselves? Right. And after they digitize it, do they have the software they can enhance it and clean it up?
Yeah.
Okay. So like, for example, you'll do some videos, you'll put them in, and the old, I'm going to video my daughter's dance recital, and then I'm going to set the camcorder down on the chair next to me and forget to turn it off. So you have 10 minutes of videoing, the wall. Right. I can take some of those sections out or whatever. So, and I love doing it. So, of course, along those lines, then I had to get newer equipment, and I had to get newer software, and that was fun too. But it's work that I love to do. It's work that I do well. And the thing that I offer to my clients, I'm primarily local. I have had some people who have mailed stuff to me from out of state, but primarily people can bring their treasures and their memories and hand them to me. So they don't want to put their, the life story, their life journey in a box and mail them somewhere. They can bring them to me. I don't use third parties, and then I can give the information back. So I got to turn, I always say, do what you love. So I got to turn my hobby that I did a lot before I got married and had kids, didn't do too much while I was in the, see when I were in the raising kids, going through, all the, shuffling kids to swimming, to dance, to all of the things. And then I got to turn that back on.
So let me ask you, how do you convert it from a hobby into a business? Because I know firsthand in the service world, doing computer stuff, like any of these people should be competent enough to change their password, but sometimes they just don't have the time, or they don't know how, or don't know the button to click. And they're better being a doctor or being an architect than being a password resetter. So we do some of that basic stuff that they could do themselves. But how do you take that service and say, yeah, you could buy the equipment, do it yourself, but I'll do it for you, and then charge it? How do you come up with that and convert to
that was the most interesting part when I started this up, because I used my my sister Joan as my proof of concept. And her and her husband have moved a lot, and she would be taking her Tupperware, her Rubbermaid containers of pictures and videos and stuff from location to location with them. So I was telling her what I was going to do for my business, and she goes, "Oh my gosh!" So I got all of her stuff, and I used her stuff, and it was a lot of videos. It was about 200 videos, and it was a lot of pictures. Couple thousand pictures, and so I digitized everything for them. For her, I gave the ultimate deal, as I put a website together for her, so her family could all access everything through her website. And So that was my proof of concept to put everything together. But then I also didn't to show, okay, number one, can I do it? Yes. Number two, can I do it with quality? Yes. Number three, how long would it take me to do this amount of work? So I
Right.
was doing a time study. And then the fourth one was, how much do I pay
Right.
or charge?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was doing then I would do some, competitor analysis. And there's some large, Legacy Box or iMemory or Southtree. There's some large companies who do high transactional version of what I do.
Sure.
And I'm not a high transactional company. I'm more of a relationship based company. And so then I was seeing what they would charge and everything. Well, anyway, I charge, and of course my sister says you're not charging enough and pays me more. And I figure, okay, well, that's a relative thing. And so then I would kind of progress and I would get some other clients or whatever. And I would, and believe it, it's funny because I would charge customers and they'd say, oh, you're not charging enough. So I just figured, okay, well, that was my benchmark of saying,
Sure.
people are happy. So it took me a while to figure out what is the price for the service, and don't underestimate myself. And so the hardest part really was getting myself into. I always worked for a company that had people who did things. I was given tools for the accounting. I was given tools for the invoicing. So it took me some time to kind of say, okay, I'll give a plug for QuickBook Online. So I figured that, and then once I had it, it was the same thing. How do I use all the deals? Or how do I track my workload? I use Trello, which is I can put in
Trello.
I can put in my different projects. I can track them through different phases. I can see what's in my queue. So going through all those phases of what are the tools I'm going to use to manage my workload, manage my accounting, and manage my annual P&L.
Sure.
Take a look at different things.
So I always break down businesses into basically 5 pieces, and I have like a visual that I usually draw out when I'm explaining this, but it's like 4 squares and then sort of a circle that surrounds them. And it's sales, marketing, finance, and operations. And then the circle would be administration of them all. In a big world, those are 4 or 5 different departments and they have different heads and all that stuff. But when you go from the corporate world to business owner, you have to wear all the hats. Which one of those do you struggle with the most?
It's funny when marketing was the one when I went into is like, well, do I put money into marketing? I'm not making money yet. So what do I want to do? So I originally built my own website, and it goes back to the thing I said way earlier was know what you know and know what you don't know and utilize people who are good at what they do.
Yeah.
So I realized quickly is that I could put a rudimentary website together for my business, but it wasn't it was different than the website I did for my sister who was going to send it to her children. They know where it is, they're going to access it, and they can navigate it very easily.
Sure.
But putting a website together to try to get, number one, discovered, and then number 2, to actually present yourself appropriately and easy to navigate. So I hired someone to do that. Okay. And they built me a very good website, and
Awesome.
people would go ahead and access it, and people would say, oh, did you buy a franchise? And I'm like, no. So part of that was so then it was okay, well, and then I had the website, and then I used Matt, a local guy from DasWow, which is his company, and he's in the Lake Norman Small Business Group. So then I was talking to him, and he helped me get some SEO set up, and so so when people put digital conversion near me, I would show up in the top 3 or 4 selections. Cool. So once I realized that there's some things out there you can do versus buying ads, or buying other things, and that kind of helped. But that was my biggest struggle. I did get usually when people will call me and I'll say, "How did you find me?" I had one gentleman was funny. And so I called him, and I was telling him what I do, and he goes, "Oh, I want to use your services." And I said, "Excuse me, so and so. Yeah, how did you find me?" He goes, "Oh, I found you on the Google." So we always laugh. It's like, "Oh, I found somebody else found me on the Google."
Yeah.
And that was my hardest item of saying how much since I wasn't trying to grow a business to compete with a legacy box at high transaction.
Yeah.
I always laugh if I would have started this, which I love doing, if I had started this 15 years ago,
Yeah.
I would have had a different concept and said, let me grow this thing, let me get some franchises, let me get in early. But that's not
Right.
where I am. And but marketing was the challenging time.
Yeah, those four, I just kind of see that most people are good at one or two, and they're not great at the others. And it's tough, especially like I said earlier, coming from the corporate world. I've seen a bunch of people that were in, working for Time Warner or Spectrum or one of the banks, and when they become an entrepreneur, they might have, I think marketing especially is the tough one, because they have this concept, especially when you're in this big corporate, the marketing's done for you. The leads come in and you just process the leads. But when you have a great concept, even if it's the best concept in the world and nobody knows about it, it's no good. So you have to market.
Yeah, and a lot of mine currently right now is people will find me on the Google, and but I'm getting a lot of references too now. So
Yeah.
I've done a high volume enough of clients who, and a lot of ones I'll get is, so hey, Marjorie told me you did some work. Can you do this? And you'll get some others. Speaking of marketing and everything, as you know, I'm in the process of transitioning from Huntersville to Asheville. And so I still plan on, people in the Lake Norman area, if they have business, I still will do that. And we'll just have to coordinate more on when I can pick up and drop off their work. But I need to now go and establish myself in the Asheville area, which will find out, once I get my Google business readjusted to Asheville and stuff. We'll see if they find me on the Google out there.
Right.
But it'll be starting a second phase of establishing Truity Digital
That'll be
up in the
interesting.
Asheville area. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was actually my next question is what's the next phase? And you're kind of transitioning to Asheville. I guess you're going to have 1 foot up there, 1 foot here for a period of time.
Yeah, it'll be 1 foot in both for a period of time. And then should Sue and I get really rooted in Asheville and love it up there and say this is where we want to be for our next chapter, then probably be doing more up in that area versus back, or clients, potential clients down here in the Lake Norman area. We would just need to coordinate. Because we still have a lot of friends down here and stuff, or whatever. So we would be back and forth, and I would just kind of pick up and do the others. But my future is I want to still do it because I still love doing what I do. And I can, during the pandemic, I probably got, I would go into my little office, my little studio, as I called it, in there, and I'd be in there for days on end. So I need to do the balance. Now we're moving to a new environment, so we'll do the balance. So my future is I want to establish a footprint in Asheville. I want to navigate the workload. And a lot of that is my own doing. People will give me work, and I'm back in the corporate where you have to get a project done fast and under budget. And then I need to realize, people have had this work in their videos and stuff in their closets for 20 years.
Right.
If it takes you a week versus 3 weeks, they generally don't mind. But establishing in Asheville, and I've adapted some additional platforms. I've gotten recently a beta deck. Okay, so I can now do beta tapes, and I didn't even know there was a videotape the size of a little micro recorder called an MN. And I had a client bring me a bunch of those. I got an MN deck. So I'm expanding to some different platforms or stuff that I can convert. Awesome.
That's great. Well, I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully we can do this again, and hopefully you don't become a stranger in Asheville. But yeah, I'm excited to see, I think that's going to be a business for years to come, because a lot of people don't even know about it. And when they move and they transition and they find these things, that's when it pops in their head. So being able to be found is good. But and good luck on the balance too. I mean, I struggle with it as well. Again, a small business. you go in phases of, you get a bunch of projects and then you work on them, and then you don't spend time selling and marketing, and then you just kind of teeter totter back and forth. So I'm excited to see what you do in Asheville. But thanks for coming on the podcast, man. It's been a great time.
I've enjoyed this very, very much. So thanks for asking me. And
absolutely.
I'll come back later and give you an update.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can kind of keep the cameras and the microphones rolling. It's this year has actually, this 2 years has been pretty crazy for everybody. Kids coming in and out, it's difficult at times. Space is hard to find, and whatever. So
and you can't have a conversation like this over Zoom. I guess you could, but it wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, we talked about earlier. It's just, this is great, having a conversation, having a coffee face to face. Is just, you can't replace it. It's just different. You grow closer. You get to know the person better. So I'm very thankful for anybody that spends an hour hanging out talking. So thanks, Ed McCutchen. Throw your website out there and everything for people to check out.
Sure. My name's Ed McCutchen, currently in Huntersville, soon to be Asheville. And the website is Truity.com, and that's TRUERITY.com. It stands for Trust and Integrity, if you're wondering where the bizarre name came. And then also email, you can put info@Truity.com, and phone number 704-641-7867.
Awesome. Yeah, check out Truity Digital. I think the name is good because trusting photos, even though they have been sitting in a closet for years, it's I was talking to my parents actually about having you do their stuff, and they're already thinking about, well, what am I going to see on this stuff when I get it back? There might be people I want to see. There might be people I don't want to see. There might be a bunch of, like you said, a bunch of wasted slides that were taking pictures of walls or whatnot. But you never know until you get it processed.
Well, you don't. And a couple of if there are slides that are or pictures that don't convert well and you barely can't see what they are, you don't pay for those. I don't do those. But I will tell you one funny story. I did a bunch of pictures for one client, and I sent a link so they could look at them virtually before I put them on a USB drive and sent to them. And she sends me an e-back with a list of the pictures she wanted to be deleted because it was her ex-fiance. So to their point, you may find pictures in there that then I've been asked, can you cut this person out of this picture? And so there's options there if some of your memories aren't fond. And on your videotapes and stuff, I'll just educationally for individuals out there, videotapes begin to degrade 10 to 20% after 10 to 15 years. So if you have your memories on videotapes and they're 10, 15, 20 years old, and they're going to naturally degrade, and because they're magnetic particles, and the magnetic particles will start to lose their adhesion. And if they're not stored in a really good place. So if you have old memories that are just sitting in a box somewhere or whatever,
don't wait.
Don't wait. You want to get those taken care of so you can get the best quality of it.
Awesome. That's great to know. Yeah, because like my parents, they've hesitated, and it's just time. You just got to make the time to do it, or you never know what'll happen. People that have gotten flooded and you can't go back. But once it's digital, it's in the cloud. It's a great concept. It's again, we wish you the best of luck, and thanks for coming on, Ed McCutchen.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.